When you buy Kroger brand products, you feel like you're winning. That's because they offer proven quality at lower than low prices. In fact, we guarantee that you and your family will love how Kroger brand products taste, or you get your money back. So next time you're shopping for the family, look for delicious Kroger brand products, because they'll make you all feel like you're winning. Shop now, in-store, or online. Bakers, fresh for everyone.
Tired of restless nights? At Leesa, we know good sleep is essential for mental, physical, and emotional health. From memory foam mattresses to hybrids that keep you cool all night long, Leesa's mattresses offer exceptional comfort and support with free delivery and 100 nights to try out your mattress in the comfort of your home. For a limited time, save up to $700 off select mattresses plus 2 free pillows. Go to leesa.com/iHeart for an additional $50 off mattresses and select goods. Exclusions apply. See leesa.com for more details.
It's time for a Big Blue Kickoff Live.
Nobody can ever tell you that you couldn't do it, because you did.
On Giants.com.
You know what I saw? New York Giant Prime.
And the Giants mobile app.
17-14 is the final. One touchdown, we are world champions. Believe it, and it will happen.
Part of the Giants Podcast Network.
Let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs. Have some fun.
Welcome to the latest edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on this Wednesday. It is presented by Cadillac, the official luxury vehicle of the New York Football Giants. He's Matt Citak. I'm Lance Medow. With you for the next 60 minutes and multiple ways to interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can also hit us up on hashtag Giants Chat. There's a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at giants.com/podcast. So we're going to continue our breakdown of prospects leading up to the NFL draft today. We've got 2 teams on tap. We'll focus on Illinois, followed by Utah. And each team has a cluster of prospects, maybe 1 or 2 guys that are projected to go relatively high in the draft. But remember, it's also who you could find in the later rounds of the draft, Matt. It's not necessarily about the focus just on the first and the second round. That's why we analyze and really put all of these teams under the microscope.
Yeah, and it'll be nice to hear, from these insiders that that cover these respective schools to find out a little bit more about some of these guys. Especially with our first caller, I would love to hear more about Jerzon Newton from Illinois. As you said, there are some other guys that are currently projected to go a little later in the draft, but he's the top prospect, probably from both schools that we're going to be, discussing today. Late first round, early second round pick. So excited to find out more about him.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of that, let's get to Illinois right off the top. Though you took the more challenging route. I thought you were just going to refer to him as Johnny, which is his more popular first name, and we'll get a little bit more insight in that as we bring on Michael Martin. He's the sideline reporter for the Illinois Radio Network. He also suited up for the Fighting Illini from 2014 to 16 as their long snapper. Michael, you got Lance Medow, Matt Citak here on Giants.com, Big Blue Kickoff Live. Greatly appreciate the time today. Hope all is well. How's everything on your end?
Yes, it is. Thank you for having me today. I'm excited to talk about some fantastic former Illini.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with who Matt was alluding to before we had you jump on, and that is the defensive tackle, Johnny Newton, 6'2", 304. I've seen NFL comparisons to Javon Hargrave, which is certainly not a bad thing considering Hargrave is a dual threat. You look at his sacks, he had 7.5 last season. He was also a really good player on special teams with 4 block kicks, which was an FBS mark that topped the list and also a school record. Where do you see production-wise, Michael, what he could do on the NFL level in terms of his run-stopping ability versus his pass-rushing ability?
Well, I think that he will end up being if he ends up being that late first round pick, like he's currently slated, that puts you in the playoff teams, and his ability to get in the backfield, especially with the kicking game, that could be big time when the rubber hits the road, if you will, in playoff level football games. But he's a tremendous asset. He was a tremendous asset to the team. Very disruptive in the backfield. I think over the last 2 seasons he led the country in QB pressures, and this kid does not like to come off the football field. He played up to 85% of the defensive snaps last season, around that mark. And he just has a motor that won't quit, and I think that whoever ends up getting him is going to be very, very pleased with their selection.
Yeah, so Lance mentioned Newton's size, 6'2", 304 pounds. Not necessarily, what I guess a lot of people would consider ideal for a defensive tackle, but the production, just looking at his stats, he clearly has the production. Do you see him being like a full-time 3-down player at the next level? I think that is what he's most comfortable in. I feel like he likes to get the rhythm of the game, and he's said on interviews multiple times that, I know what they're running before they even run it. Now, obviously, the men's league has a different level of complexity to the offense, so that has to be taken into consideration. But he's definitely shown, at least on the college level, the stamina and robustness to be that 3-down type of defensive player.
Michael, when we talk about interior defensive linemen, it's not just to me what they offer, it's what they open up for their teammates, and I'm sure he's going to be somebody that NFL defensive coordinators turn to maybe drawing attention so that other teammates can flourish. How did you see those dynamics play out at Illinois, where maybe plays that he didn't finish on a sack or he wasn't even involved in maybe stopping the run, but the attention that he drew and what that did to open things up for the rest of the Illinois defense?
Yeah, it definitely felt like at times the defense really ran through Johnny. I will use it as an example. The second half of the Wisconsin game this past year, he had a high hit on a quarterback that was called a targeting, and he ended up having to leave the field, and the defense was completely different once he had to leave. They were able to game plan it for the first half of the Minnesota game last year, and he came back and made a name for himself in the second half against Minnesota, stopping their offense cold. But guys like Keith Randolph Jr., the other half of the tandem that Coach Brett Bielema coined the law firm of Newton and Randolph. He's good at marketing, trust me. But
well, we've seen him here with the Giants organization, so we saw it firsthand.
Oh yeah, he puts that marketing degree from Iowa to good use. But he opened up a lot of opportunities, especially for Keith Randolph Jr. to be able to make that have them make an impact. And I think you may have seen it best in 2022 when we had an NFL caliber secondary. You guys may recognize names like Sidney Brown, who's with the Eagles now, and Quan Martin, who's with the Commanders now, and Devin Witherspoon, who was a top 5 draft pick to Seattle. They really played together well. The secondary kept the quarterback from making a decision, and Johnny and his teammates were able to pressure that quarterback, and they definitely played very good complementary football, and Johnny certainly is going to be missed.
So I know Johnny had surgery back in early January, which forced him to sit out at the Combine along with Illinois' Pro Day a couple of weeks ago. Do you have any word on how he's doing in his recovery? I believe I saw earlier this morning that they set a date for a Pro Day for Johnny himself, I think in the next few weeks. Do you know which drills he's going to be able to participate in, if any? What's the deal with his recovery?
That information hasn't been released to me, but I did see that personal pro day that he's going to have the opportunity to participate in, and I think that's one of the reasons he may have fallen down some draft boards, because they haven't seen him since November be able to do anything significant. So I think that it's possible that he may be able to climb back up into that mid-first round area in terms of getting picked up by a team, but in terms of what he'll be capable to do or what his recovery is like right now, I don't have that. I'm really sorry.
Michael, I want to move to some of the other prospects, mainly on the offensive side of the ball. Tip Ryman, tight end, great story. Went from a walk-on to being a team captain. I mean, clearly his offensive numbers don't jump off the board. So if he's going to have success on the NFL level, it's probably going to be mainly as a blocking tight end, an additional offensive lineman. Where would you assess his blocking and the pros and cons that come with the facet of that part of his game?
Well, I think that the tight end position in the NFL is really interesting right now. Obviously, everyone pays attention to the receiving types of tight ends like the Kelseys, but you see guys like George Kittle be able to make a name for themselves both in the passing game and the blocking game. Tip was a tremendous asset to us blocking. He opened up a lot of holes that otherwise would not have been there, and I think at 6'5", 271, he'll definitely have an opportunity to be that second tight end on the roster that's brought in for situational running. Definitely going to be an option on special teams for them, but we'll have to end up seeing how he ends up projecting. I think in terms of his pass catching ability, he has a little bit of trouble getting separation, but with the new hip drop tackle rule. That is, or hip drop tackle ban, I should say, that the league is going to be implementing. He may have some his big body and big frame may find it. He has a few opportunities in the flat to catch a few passes and make it hard for defensive backs to tackle him. So we'll have to end up seeing. He'll definitely be a third day guy coming out, but I think someone's going to take a chance on them. And coming back to Coach Bielema, he's been touting him. He's been touting Tip Ryman as an NFL tight end the entire 2023 season, and I think that he's going to make some team very, very happy come the third day of the draft.
He doesn't belong to a law firm, though, just for clarification, right?
No, he does not, unfortunately. But he definitely makes his own name. I respect his path to the NFL. I was a former walk-on myself, and it takes a certain kind of player to be able to bet on yourself and make a name for yourself. And I respect the heck out of his path and wish nothing but the best for him.
Sticking with Tip, I know you just briefly mentioned projected day 3 pick, but he was probably one of the big winners from Indianapolis at the Combine. I mean, he really excelled there. How much do you think he kind of helped himself and boosted his own draft stock with his standout athletic performance at the Combine?
I think he did exceptionally well. I mean, the 40 time definitely pops out. At 271 pounds, being able to move as fast as he did, I was very impressed and pleased to hear that he ran a 4.64, excuse me, at the draft. He definitely put it up there, and I'm not sure how much it may have helped, but it definitely put his name on people's radars. His bit on the birds aren't real deal, where he gave an interview and said, "Oh yeah, birds aren't real." It's an internet joke that a lot of people either you get it or you don't. But he got put on a few headlines because of that, and definitely made a name for himself that way. That may have been some guerrilla marketing on his part. I'm not sure.
Well, it seems to be feeding from the head coach atop the food chain. I think the rest of the players know how to play the game on the NFL level. I want to stay, Michael, in the trenches. There's a pair of offensive linemen that were at the Combine and probably going to be, to your point, day 3 picks, maybe even undrafted free agents. But you got guard Isaiah Adams and you have Julian Pearl. So you've got 2 players that have been moved around, where Pearl started at right tackle, then moved to left tackle each of the last 2 seasons, and Adams, he's played every position with the exception of center. So always when we're evaluating offensive linemen, the question is, okay, they were moved around, they showcase their versatility. What's the ideal fit, though, on the NFL level? So how would you assess those 2 in terms of their place as they look to make the jump?
Well, I definitely think that Isaiah, he was very unselfish in how he handled last season. We had you referenced it a little bit, but we had some depth issues at tackle last season. He definitely fits as a guard in the men's league, as they say, but he played almost the entire season at right tackle because that's what the team needed. And there's a reason why Isaiah was elected the team captain. And he's the type of humble leader that any offensive line would benefit from. But Isaiah definitely slots in at guard much better. And if the NFL doesn't end up working out for him, right now he's looking at third day, undrafted, as you said. He's a top 10 prospect for the CFL. He's originally Canadian, so he may have an option up there. As for Julian Pearl, I have to give a shout-out to a fellow 217 product. I'm from Champaign originally, where the University of Illinois is. He's a few minutes east in Danville, Illinois. I think that he ends up projecting better at guard than tackle. I thought he did exceptionally well in his earlier years at guard, but it's one of those things where tackle depth was an issue, and he found an opportunity, and he did very well at left tackle. I thought he was a bit hindered with a hand injury. He had to wear a brace that immobilized his index, middle, and ring finger throughout most of last season. So he couldn't grab with that hand. So that may reflect a little bit poorly on his tape, but if he can get that recovered and fixed, then he could definitely surprise some people once rookie minicamps come along.
One more from me. Going to one of the playmakers on offense, Isaiah Williams. Back-to-back seasons with over 80 receptions. I believe he led the Big Ten in receptions this past season and was number 2 in receiving yards. Didn't have the best performance at the Combine, and considering that and his size, 5'9", 182, do you think he projects solely as a slot receiver in the NFL, or do you think he can also succeed on the outside?
I think just based on his measurables and his size, probably a slot guy, maybe a gadget play here or there. He originally started his career at quarterback at Illinois. He ended up making the change to wide receiver after Brett Bielema was hired in 2021, and he's improved his route running abilities every single year. It's still wanting at times, but he definitely was a go-to receiver for our quarterback room this year, and I think he has the ability to get mixed in on some gadget plays maybe, and if he can clean up his ball security on punts, when Isaiah Williams gets out in the open field, he is dangerous, and I hope he can find an opportunity in wherever he can, but slot and punt return are definitely there. And I will say, just given the context of this call, it sure would be fun to see him catching passes from Tommy DeVito again.
Well, there you go, the Illini connection. Well, your point is well taken, Michael. 3 muff punts in the last 2 seasons. Clearly, if he's going to be a late-round pick, he's going to start off on special teams, needs to clean that up. A quick follow-up before we let you go. I think when you watch him and you read analysis on him, the common phrase is, okay, he's 5'9", as Matt pointed out, but he plays a lot bigger than he appears. How much do you get that feel? Because there was a lot of skepticism even with a guy like Devontae Smith, who was at Alabama, went to the Eagles. Well, small guy, slim frame, he's not going to make it, and he's held up fine. So how do you assess whether or not he does indeed maybe make up for his lack of frame in terms of how he plays?
I think that especially on the college level, his understanding of the game and understanding of leverages from his time as a quarterback really helped aid him get that extra step ahead of a defensive player. He may not find that step immediately when he gets to that next level, but like I said, he's only been a receiver for 3 years, and his route running ability gets better every year. And if someone takes him on and gives him a little bit of time to develop, he could definitely. I think he has tremendous upside and has a great chance to make an impact in the league.
He is Michael Martin, sideline reporter for the Illinois Radio Network, former long snapper for the Fighting Illini from 2014 to 16. Michael, can't thank you enough. Greatly appreciate the time and the insight, and look forward to talking to you down the road.
Thank you, Michael.
And I appreciate it. Anytime. Go Illini.
You got it. Our pleasure. Michael Martin with the latest in terms of a breakdown of what to expect from the Illinois prospects. And they've got a wide variety of positions, but as we talked about, Matt, you got off the top, their defensive lineman, Johnny Newton, who's going to get the most attention and probably go high. And to me, he's attractive because he can stop the run and get after the quarterback. And I think most teams, you always want that versatility, especially if it's going to be a guy that's going to line up mainly on the interior of the defensive front.
Yeah, I mean, I think he would be a perfect fit next to Dexter Lawrence.
Sure.
Unfortunately, I don't see any way in which he drops all the way down to 47. Maybe at one point during his this rehab recovery, there was maybe a hope that he would drop into early, mid-second round. But with him, at least doing some drills at his upcoming pro day in the next few weeks, I'm assuming as long as he puts up solid, even decent numbers, that he's going to find himself at the very end of the first round, most likely.
Well, and mainly because, once again, what we were talking with Michael about is what he did for other teammates. To me, I think is appealing because, as you mentioned, he'd be a great tandem with Dexter Lawrence. You can imagine what Dexter would do for him, vice versa. But highly unlikely that he'll be in the ballpark for the Giants to grab him when we get into the second round. All right, we'll get more into Illinois as we move forward, our personal opinions on some of those prospects. Right now, let's turn our attention to the Utah Utes, and we bring in former NFL quarterback. He's the color analyst on the Utah Radio Network, and that is none other than Scott Mitchell. Scott, you got Lance Medow, Matt Citak with you here on Giants.com. Greatly appreciate the time. Hope all is well. How's everything on your end?
Absolutely phenomenal. It's sunny here in Utah. It's great to be on with you. Always happy to talk about my Utes and the NFL and football, so let's do it.
Absolutely. Well, and you have some interesting connections to the roster, which we'll get to in terms of the Ellis family coming up. But I want to start with probably their top prospect, and that is also on the defensive side of the ball in safety, Cole Bishop, who has the appeal, Scott, just from pure size at 6'2", 206, and he seemed to be a very active player around the line of scrimmage. How much do you think that will transfer over to the NFL? Because when you see a safety with 7.5 sacks, that clearly is appealing, but I think it depends on how the defensive coordinator that he goes to winds up tapping into that potential.
Yeah, Cole's a great individual, and he's a player that just kind of has a nose for the football. And you watch some guys, you mentioned getting sacks and being a guy around the line of scrimmage. Some guys will rush the quarterback for years, never get to him. And Cole Bishop was just a guy that could get to the quarterback when he had the opportunity. Just great instincts, really understands football. He's a guy that will make plays for you. He's a guy that, he can be a coverage safety. He's a guy that also you can bring up at the line of scrimmage. So he's got a lot of versatility. He has a lot of experience, too. He played a lot of years and got better. It's kind of an interesting thing with COVID where you see these 6-year guys, and I think it actually helps the NFL because they get a better, these guys have been playing longer. So if you see that continual progress with a player, he has more of an upside. But if you get a player that's kind of flattened out, he's played 7 years of college football and he's kind of about the same player, that's about what you're going to get. And I've just seen with Cole Bishop, a guy that just every year he's gotten better and better and better. He'll be a great player for whoever gets him.
Yeah, so as Lance mentioned, Cole Bishop has great size, very athletic. I mean, he crushed it at the combine in almost pretty much every single category, and he has the production too. So going to the next level when he enters the NFL, what areas do you think he needs to improve on in order to solidify himself as a starter in the NFL moving forward?
It's so much about speed in the NFL on the defensive side of the ball. And as a safety, he's got to show an ability to really be rangy. Guys that translate the safeties, and there have been a few of them at Utah that have translated and done well. And it's that ability to show range as a defending safety. I think that's really the biggest thing. I think he's a guy that, certain matchups he can play one-on-one with guys, but he certainly has the athleticism. And you see in the Pac-12, especially last year, you saw a lot of, the throwing game and a lot of teams, Washington, Oregon, USC, even Arizona, really threw the ball down the field. And And so he's seen that. But that to me, I think, is going to be the biggest adjustment for him.
Scott, how much do you look at him as an enforcer because of his toughness and his ability to make noise and execute around the line of scrimmage? I'm not insinuating, Scott, that he's going to be a dirty player on the NFL level, but it seems as if he could be a guy for the sake of the locker room and specifically in the defensive room that could be a tone setter. And I'm just curious how much you would agree with that sentiment.
Probably not a lot, actually. I don't think he's, he's a football player, and he's just a guy that makes plays. I mean, he's a guy that's a leader too. He's not one of these, he's got a high motor. He's been a great influencer, but I don't think you're going to see it from a negative enforcer type of player. But where he will do it is in his ability to make plays. He's going to be a guy that is going to garner respect because he really shows it on the field, and he's a guy that's going to be a difference maker, for whoever gets him.
So sticking at the safety position, but moving over to one of Cole's teammates, Sione Vaki. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, nice job, Sione Vaki. Yeah,
thank you. Not sure. I mean, I feel like he's like a borderline day 3 pick, maybe undrafted free agent sort of player at this point. I know he did a good job at the pro day last week. He really impressed. But he did a little of everything for Utah this past season. I mean, he had 50-something touches on offense along with his pretty solid play at the safety position. But given his size and somewhat limited athletic ability, where do you think that Vaki would fit in best at the next level?
See, I think Sione Vaki is a real sleeper in the draft, and I wished he would have stayed another year because he was really showing a lot, and kind of being an all-around player, it may have hurt him a little bit from a defensive perspective because that's predominantly what he's been. But boy, he showed some great explosion offensively and a lot of versatility. He's a guy that could come out of the backfield as a running back. He could put him in the slot as a wide receiver. He's got great hands. I saw a lot of explosive plays about him and very athletic plays. So the idea that he's limited athletically, I don't know that I agree with that. He's kind of like Puka Nacua. Where Puka kind of was injured at BYU, but he was a baller. He was a guy that just made play after play after play, and he got in the right situation in the NFL, and it really was a way for him to develop, and to kind of showcase what he could really do. And that's why, for me, I think Sione, just this whole idea of being a two-way player was kind of out of necessity, and it happened not at the beginning of the season. So there's not a great body of work to really analyze him on film doing that, and I think whoever gets him they're gonna get I believe to steal the draft, because if he goes undrafted, he goes past the 3rd round. Whoever gets him is going to be pleasantly surprised. This guy has massive upside to me, and he showed a lot of versatility. He can do a lot of things for an offense, even defensively, and I think he just needs a little bit more work.
Well,
I'd draft him. Yeah. I'd draft him in a minute.
Well, I was going to say, Scott, if he ends up as an undrafted free agent, that may be good news for him because then he could pick where he wants to go, where maybe there's the best pathway to make the 53-man roster. So sometimes that's a positive development as well. I want to stay on the defensive side of the ball. I had alluded to this off the top. Jonah Ellis is a familiar name. It should be for NFL fans. His brother Caden's on the Falcons. His father Luther was a teammate of yours with the Lions and is the defensive tackles coach at Utah. So you have obviously strong ties to the family. I guess the big question is, Scott, very similar to his brother Caden, the size, and is he undersized to be an edge rusher in the NFL, or in all likelihood will he make the transition like his brother did to linebacker? How do you look at his pathway on the next level?
Yeah, it really is the question of the day. And Luther and I were teammates, and he's just a wonderful human being. He's just, he's a great coach, great player, great father. So his sons have just got a great foundation for being good people, and And I think a lot of times that translates that you're going to get the maximum out of whatever ability they have, and that's kind of what Jonah is. He's just a guy that's relentless. He just has that knack and that instinct for the football. He was great at Utah last year, and even before until he got injured. And he is undersized as a defensive lineman. I don't know that he believes that, which is half the battle. You've seen guys undersized perform and do well and become Hall of Famers in the NFL, but I think he has the ability to stand up, and get in if he gets in the right defense, where he's kind of that hybrid player, the 3-4 look a lot of teams run. He could definitely be a guy that goes forward and backward at the line of scrimmage and do well, because he's very athletic and he's just the kind of kid that's like, I will give you every ounce of ability and effort that I have. Just tell me where to go and what to do, and whatever it is, he's just. I don't think he's opposed to any of that, and he has the, he's got the background. And it's such a huge thing when you go into the NFL and you have someone that can really mentor you through the process. And I think it can be the difference between whether you make it or you don't, or having his brother and his dad and just that support, and it's just this huge factor in just kind of. Navigating those NFL waters. But I love Jonah, love his effort, love the impact he had at Utah. He'll find a place. I think that's the thing to me, where talent just finds it, in the NFL. If you have talent, you can play. There's just somewhere for you. And it usually, may be an interesting road to get there for a lot of guys. But, usually if you have the talent, you're gonna make it.
Yeah, so looking at his stats from last season, 12 sacks, 16 tackles for loss, clearly was a very impactful player for the Utah defense. This might seem like a simple question, but how did he find so much success as a pass rusher, given him being undersized? Like, what areas, specifically would you say are his strengths? And do you think any of those strengths could translate into him, if not being a starting edge rusher or outside linebacker in the NFL, at least being a solid special teams contributor?
Well, one of the things about having his dad, and his dad was the coach of the interior, defensive tackles, but really understands, technique. It's a big jump typically for defensive linemen from the NFL or from college to the NFL, and technique becomes so much a factor in things. And he's just so quick on the edge. There's not a lot of wasted time and energy getting to the quarterback. He's a guy that showed versatile moves. He can get around the edge. He can pivot back to the inside. So there's a lot of technique wise, and he's super quick. And I think he's maybe stronger and more stout than people give him credit for. But it'll be a tall order when he gets those really good offensive tackle, guys that really understand technique and get their mitts on him. He's got to kind of not give so much of himself up to these guys and get thin and get around edges, because that's really where his strength is going to be, is his quickness, and he'll have to utilize that. If he's going to be effective as a rusher in the NFL.
Scott, you brought up the offensive line. That's where I want to go as we flip the switch to the other side of the ball for Utah, and guard Satawa Laumea, if I have that correct, as that flowed off the tongue. 4-year starter. He played guard and tackle. Seems though he played more tackle than guard the last 2 years. Where do you see him plugging in at the next level? Because, the agility and the athleticism is there. I guess it's just a matter of, is he more comfortable on the outside, or is his body better fit for the inside?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I always felt he was better on the inside. So Sataoa Laumea is kind of how it goes, but we learned those Polynesian names here at Utah.
Sure, absolutely.
And anyway, he's I love him. I really do. This guy is just he's just a nasty player. The Utah kind of they like their offensive linemen to be kind of big and bulky, and NFL guys are lean. You got to be able to be lean and move, and I think he has that inside in him. He's very athletic. His body shape is going to need to change a little bit in the NFL, but he certainly has the foundation to do that, and the athleticism. To me, he's more of a guard in the NFL. I think it's a better position for him, but that body composition changes a little bit, and he's a nasty player. I saw a lot of just really just nasty blocks. He's a guy that can get to the second level, which is a hard thing, and a big adjustment. But he's a guy that can do it. And one of the things with the absence of Cam Rising last year, teams just stuffed the box and just dared Utah to throw the football. So he saw a lot of difficult looks, challenging looks in the run game that I think will help him, to kind of make that next level, because there's a lot of complexity to the running games in the NFL, and the biggest challenge though is pass protection, because it's much more diversified and complex in the NFL, and it's not something that he saw per se at Utah. But as far as a guy that can block and do it both in the run and pass game, he's a guy that, he'll I think he'll end up somewhere, but be a guy that can play.
So I know you mentioned you think he might be, project better inside at guard, but just looking at his performance this past season, he played almost 800 offensive snaps, didn't allow a single sack at right tackle. Is there any part to his game you think he could improve in order to succeed on the outside as a tackle, other than just maybe getting a little quicker and like slimming down a bit? Is there any area that you think he can improve on that could help solidify himself as more of a tackle than a guard?
One of the things that's been nice is that he's got a lot of work at both, and so it's certainly not beyond him. To go in the NFL and go, hey, it's easier to start on the outside and move to the inside than to be on the inside and move out. And if he's a guy that's been out there, at least he has a framework to work with. But just some of the quickness of those guys on the outside is something that I don't think he's really seen a lot of. And certainly it's what he would have to deal with. And can he do it? It's possible. I just and if he slims down, and it's not so much slimming down, it's just kind of repositioning some of the muscle groups, I guess is a better way to put it. And I think he can do that, and maybe he shows that he has that ability when he's kind of in that body framework. But the best way for him to start and to have success in the NFL is from the inside.
Scott, one last player that I want to throw out before we let you go, and it's only because of his size, is that wide receiver Devon Vele, who's 6'4". I know, to your point, limited because of the quarterback play, so you have to take that into consideration in terms of production, but he's got a big catch radius. He seems to be clearly somebody that can win those 50-50 balls at the NFL level, but the two things that concern me is finishing catches, a little bit of case of the dropsies, and the fact that he's going to be 26 years old, which is on the older side than most rookies. How concerning are those last two factors for you there?
He's good at catching football. He does have limited film just because of the nature of the quarterback situation, and Utah don't really throw the ball to receivers much.
Sure.
But they did to him a lot, and he was a favorite target of Cam Rising when he was healthy, and he was very productive at the position. But it was kind of back to my point earlier about these guys that have been in school a long time, and you don't see a lot of improvement, and they're good, they're productive, but you just don't, you should see more from a kid who's 26 years old. I think of Bo Nix and I think of Michael Penix, and that they were in school a long time, but they got better, and so you feel much more comfortable with that. I think Devon has reached his ceiling, and I'm not sure it's a guy that could really make it in the NFL.
He is Scott Mitchell, former NFL quarterback, color analyst on the Utah Radio Network. Scott, it's always good catching up with you. Greatly appreciate the time and the insight, and look forward to talking to you down the road.
Yeah, thank you. Always a pleasure. I'll come back anytime.
Absolutely. Well, thanks
Scott.
so much. Yeah, that is Scott Mitchell with us here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. A great breakdown on the Utah prospects earlier. It was Illinois, and we'll circle back around before we wrap up shop. But a few reminders, and then we also want to open up the phone lines as we move forward here. And in terms of the Giants Huddle podcast, you can check that out on your favorite podcast platform. You can also go to giants.com/podcast. As we gear up for the 2024 campaign, you can take your fandom to the next level. Season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2024 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And the Giants official connected TV streaming app, Giants TV, it brings you original video content, game highlights on demand, and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, as well as the Giants mobile app. All right, let's open up the phone lines at 201-939-4513. We check in with Hugo in New Jersey. What's happening, Hugo? What do you got for us?
Hey, good afternoon, guys. I want to talk a bit about the offensive line, and I noticed that both John Mara and Joe Shane took some questions about it at the owners' meeting. It's something I've been thinking about now for a while. I don't really like the language that's being used about the offensive line. And what I mean by that is, what should be the right expectations for this line? So you hear words like functional, position flexibility, improvement. Well, there better be improvement over last year because that was a historically bad offensive line. But let's be honest here. The Giants have 2 top 10 picks, a second-round pick, a high third-round pick, a fifth-round pick, and now some significant free agent dollars invested in the offensive line. The only other offensive line I could think of in the NFL that has as much invested is Detroit with 3 first-round picks. By the way, only Sewell being a top 10 pick. But they're the best offensive line in the league. And when you sink this many resources into an offensive line, by definition, it means you deplete or ignore other parts of the roster. So the expectation should really be that this is a top 5 offensive line. And for this to work out well, I think, because the question was asked on one of the shows last week, what do you think the starting 5 are? For the return on investment to work, the starters should be Thomas, Ezeudu, Schmitz, the winner in competition of the Luminor or John Runyon, and Neal. And if it's some other combination, that means that
Well, hold on. Runyon's going to start. I mean, you just talked about investing in an offensive lineman, and you're saying Runyon's coming in to compete. Runyon's going to have one of those 2 guard spots. He's not going to be benched in favor of another guy. I completely disagree with you.
Well, I don't see him as an excellent guard.
Well, then what was the purpose? You just talked about investing resources in the offensive line, and now you then, in the other side of the equation, completely dismiss the guys they invested in. I mean, doesn't make any sense.
I mean, it's $10 million a year. It's not Robert Hunt $20 million a year. Let's just be clear.
$10 million is not chump change, though. Last time I checked.
Hey, if he's expensive depth, he's expensive depth. You can't look. I mean, okay, so let's say he's one of the starters, and Illuminor is the swing tackle at $7 million a year.
Well, Illuminor could be the other guard, is what I'm talking about. Runyon and Illuminor are your 2 guards, and Neal is at right tackle.
Okay, so Ezeudu a high third-round pick. Whatever.
Well, Ezeudu doesn't have nearly as much money invested in him, number one, and Ezeudu also has not proven that he can stay healthy on the field. So I don't look at them on the same level as the other guys they just brought in. I think it's different.
Look, the reason why you're going out and spending decent amounts of money on kind of middle-tier offensive linemen is because the draft choices aren't any good. For this to work out well, these draft choices need to work out well. That's my point, and that this offensive line should have a different expectation set around it, not just let's improve over the disaster it was last year. We never talk about positional flexibility around Thomas because he's just positional excellence. That's what we should be talking about. Positional excellence, not all this other nonsense.
Go ahead, Matt.
Thomas is also up there, a top 3 left tackle in the entire league. While everyone expects the Giants' offensive line to definitely be improved, I'm not sure any of the other guys that they brought in or acquired over the last couple of seasons would be considered that high caliber, at least yet. Obviously, they can improve and get to that place. But Thomas is, 2 years ago, Thomas was probably the best left tackle in the entire NFL.
Let's move away from that and go back to my point. Who has more resources invested in our offensive line than the Giants? Maybe just the Lions. And they're the best offensive line in the league.
Well, but the Lions drafted those guys. That's what they did with a lot of those players.
Well, that's my point.
Well, but the Giants have not done that necessarily to the same degree, because to your point, you're saying that those guys haven't reached the level of expectations. The Lions guys have reached the level of expectations. Frank Ragnow was a first-round pick, okay? So was Penei Sewell, and Graham Glasgow was a third-rounder. But all those guys have played consistently at a specific level since they've been drafted. Not the same trajectory as the Giants players.
You're not getting my point. My point is that given the level, I'm not saying it's 1-for-1 the level of investment, but what I'm saying is, given the level of investment, this offensive line should be closer to the Lions than to whatever the bottom feeder is, which is what they were last year. Well, that's my point.
Okay, but that's a very generic term. If the Lions are the top of the food chain and you're talking about the Giants were at the bottom, getting towards the midway point, maybe a little bit more reasonable, but not necessarily the number 2 offensive line in football, given a lot of these guys haven't played with one another. You have a new offensive line coach. It's different dynamics here we're talking about.
That's a suboptimal return on investment. That's my point. That in essence implies that the picks weren't very good picks.
Well, what picks are we talking about? The Giants, the moves they've made this offseason are not picks.
Ezeudu was a high third-round pick. John Michael Smith was a second-round pick. Evan Neal was a 7th overall pick. Marcus McKeithen was a 5th-round pick.
Okay.
That's what I'm talking about.
And McKeithen and Ezeudu have not stayed on the field, so it's almost impossible to evaluate those guys because it's been limited. Neal has had his fair share of ups and downs and also has not stayed healthy. You got to look at there's a reason why those guys haven't panned out, and injury has a lot to do with it. I'm not disputing that. That my point is the Lions guys, but the Lions guys have stayed healthy. That's the point. So, we're seeing it through the same lens. You don't have enough to evaluate the Giants guys because the Lions guys have stayed on the field and they've executed. That's the major difference. That's why they've gotten a better return than the Giants have.
Staying healthy and executing translates to me as one word: good player, as opposed to bad players with a bunch of excuses. Okay? So, look, let's change the narrative. Let's change the standard. The offensive line has to be a difference maker because by definition, you didn't invest in other parts of the roster by investing so much on the offensive line. I think you would agree with that.
Well, they certainly have addressed that and appreciate the phone call, Hugo. But, once again, I don't think, Matt, anybody's looking at the Giants' offensive line and expecting it from a realistic standpoint to be the number 2 offensive line in football. They got a lot of work to do in that department. Number 2, as I mentioned, you don't know who's going to start at certain positions. Nothing is as solidified as the Lions' offensive line, which, if you're going to use that as the model, there's been continuity on that offensive line. So I don't think it's a good comparison to bring Detroit into the conversation. And also, I'd have to look. I disagree. There are other offensive lines that have used resources from a financial standpoint. I wouldn't just put the Giants and the Lions on their own island. If I look through the rest of the league, I'll find other teams that have drafted guys and have invested long-term contracts in offensive linemen. The Giants and the Lions are not on one end of the spectrum, and everybody else is playing catch-up.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. Last season, the Giants gave up 85 sacks. That was 20 more than any other team. So to expect them, despite all the resources put on the offensive line this offseason so far, to expect them to go from the number 32 offensive line, at least in terms of pass protection, all the way up to number 2, I don't think that's reasonable. That's not reasonable expectations to put on anyone. And looking at the moves they did make this offseason, bringing in Runyon and Jermaine Illuminor, I know Hugo mentioned what is positional versatility, what does that do? But it provides them with insurance for other positions. Illuminor has experience at guard. And I would say right now, based on the comments made by Joe Shane and John Mara earlier this week, he's probably right now slotted in at one of the guard spots on the starting offense line with Evan Neal at right tackle. But if Evan Neal continues his production from the last 2 seasons and really struggles to start the season, they signed Illuminor to be able to shift him right out to the right tackle and have him start there, where he had a lot of success last season. So I don't think positional versatility is something to just, laugh at. Like, that is, the Giants made the offseason additions they brought in were made for a specific reason, to be able to play at multiple positions. Because also, look how many injuries the offensive line had last season. You had guys shifting all across the offensive line because a new guy was getting hurt every single week, at least for the first half of the season. So having guys that could line up in multiple positions along the offensive line, that adds a lot of value.
I'm completely with you. Plus, the Giants, this goes back to the point about Azudu and McKeithen, who the last caller brought up. They're not going to come into another season, Matt, and bank on those guys staying healthy. So you have to get to a point where no matter where they were picked, and we're talking about 3rd and 5th rounders. I mean, let's not treat these guys as if they're 1st and 2nd rounders, and I've got nothing against them, but you can't continue to do the same thing over and over again and expect different results. So the Giants are of the mindset, we like Azudu, we like McKeithen, hopefully they can get back on the field healthy, but we also need to protect ourselves in the event they can't stay healthy, that we have other options and flexibility to utilize. I mean, that seemed to be a big part of the approach for the team this offseason.
Of course. I mean, if they don't go out and sign Runyon and Illuminor and just go into the 2024 season with Neal as the, locked in right tackle with no competition, Azudu locked in at one of the guard positions, I don't see how you could just automatically expect better results than last season. Obviously, you hope that everyone improves as they get another year under their belts, but you can't just expect it. Like, what's the saying? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results.
100%.
So,
yeah. And I'm just looking at perusing around the league. I'll bring up the Los Angeles Chargers, okay? And I'm not saying that their line held up. They had a rough go. They also dealt with injuries. Rashawn Slater, 1st-round pick. Zion Johnson, 1st-round pick also. Corey Linsley, they spent money on to bring in the center from the Green Bay Packers. I mean, that's 3 of their 5 offensive linemen. So that's a lot of resources that they put in. That's why I would not speak in generics that it's just the Giants and the Lions. The Kansas City Chiefs, Matt, okay? They've moved on from Orlando Brown Jr., but he was brought in at left tackle last season, okay? They spent money on him. Jawan Taylor, they spent money on from the Jaguars. Creed Humphrey at center was a 2nd-round pick. And Joe Tooney, who is an all-pro guard, who unfortunately was injured during the AFC Championship game in the Super Bowl, did not cost pennies, okay? So that was 4 of their 5 offensive linemen from last year. To just say the Giants and the Lions are the only teams and therefore we should put them on a pedestal is just absolute insanity here. I can't think of a better term that's more fitting for what has been thrown out on this program.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the caller, even kind of scoffed at the 2 offensive line additions that the Giants did bring in Runyon and Illuminor, but it was very clear that Joe Shane in the front office went into the offseason with a very specific plan on how they wanted to attack the needs along the offensive line. You look at both of those guys, they are extremely durable. I mean, that's a common theme on pretty much everyone that was brought in this offseason.
Yep.
Guys that are able to stay on the field, which again, looking back at last season, the injuries along the offensive line, that is a big thing. If you can have the same or at least most of the same offensive line throughout the entire season, I can guarantee you will see better play if you can get that guys consistently on the field. And for those 2 guys specifically, John Runyon last year, again, played every game, gave up 2 sacks the whole season. Jermaine Illuminor, a little more, he gave up 6 sacks, but all 6 of them came in 3 games. 5 of the 6 sacks came in back-to-back weeks against TJ Watt and Khalil Mack with the Steelers and Chargers. So 14 of the other games Illuminor was on the field, did not give up a single sack. 15 games all season, Runyon did not give up a single sack. So they clearly went into the offseason, the front office, with the intention of adding durable guys that they can rely on that are strong in pass protection. And that's exactly what these 2 veterans bring to the offensive line.
Also, what I would add is, to strengthen your point, you also don't make those investments in specifically 2 interior offensive linemen if you feel that good about what is currently on the roster and that they're going to hold up. So it circles back to, Matt, the conversation we had earlier about Azudu and McKeithen. If they felt that good about those two guys, what's the purpose of investing in Illuminor? And what's the purpose of investing in Runyon? After you wound up losing your two interior offensive linemen who started last season. So you knew it was a position they'd have to address, Matt. I mean, you don't have the two guys that, for the most part, played left guard and right guard because they were both free agents. So you went out, and by the way, not only did you bring in Runyon and Illuminor, you also went out and got Aaron Stinney, okay? Let's not forget about him, who started a boatload of games with Tampa Bay. And I'll even throw Austin Schlottman, who I know can play center, but he's had experience at guard. So they brought in, Matt, 4 interior offensive linemen. That's why it's not any shot against Azudu and McKeithen, but you could tell the writing is on the wall. They're going to protect themselves, and they're going to give these new guys ample time to come in, win those jobs, as opposed to just saying we're just going to run back what we had last season.
Yeah, and I mean, even he's not interior, but I'm going to add just Matt Nelson to the conversation
from the
as
Lions.
Well.
No, that's good
Lions,
one too. Sure,
he was brought in pretty much to be like the swing tackle position or to compete for that, but clearly the front office wanted to add a lot of bodies to the offensive line, both interior and exterior, to avoid the problem that happened last year. I mean, Justin Pugh ended up starting more than half of the season at guard, and this was a big joke last season, but literally came straight off of the couch to the Giants starting lineup within a week. They don't want the Giants don't want to have that happen again, and that has become obvious with all the offensive linemen they have brought in, that they are preparing themselves for that situation to never happen again.
Let's head back to the phone lines. We check in with Wilson in Roxbury here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. Maybe against my judgment, but we'll roll the dice here. What's happening, Wilson?
Hey, Lance. Hey, Lance, man, how you doing today? You a little better today? You're not drinking Dunkin' Donuts today?
No, I'm still drinking, though. I got my mug here. I mean, I'm always drinking. You got to keep the fluids running through the voice. Yes.
Listen, I hope that what John Mara said about being open to draft a quarterback with the 6th overall pick was just talk to the media, and he doesn't really believe it, because that is insane. And I tell you why. If the Giants draft a quarterback with the 6th overall pick, you're guaranteeing a 4th year of Brian Daboll, and that's asinine. Brian Daboll should be coaching for his job this year, meaning you don't make the playoffs, you're fired. Meaning you have any more meltdowns on the sideline, you're fired. Meaning any more rumors that you're horrible to work with, you're fired. You cannot give this guy a lifeline in the 4th year. John Mara is going to regret the fact that he didn't bring Bill Belichick this year. That I'll bet my house on it. But to give Brian Daboll an out like this, you got to be out of your mind.
Well,
I mean, why is this? Can I ask you? Why is this overwhelming belief in Brian Daboll? Okay, so he made the playoffs this first year. Then he was a disaster last year. So he was the mastermind, and the first year he was the greatest thing since sliced bread. But last year he has no culpability, so nothing was his fault. I just can't believe it. You got to let this guy coach for his job this year.
All right,
and if you bring.
I'm going to jump in real quick.
Go ahead.
I know this is like a popular opinion. I see this on Twitter all the time, that if a team drafts a quarterback high in the first round, that guarantees the head coach a longer leash another year. I just want to point out, last year Frank Reich was brought into the Carolina Panthers, who made the move up to draft Bryce Young, and he got fired less than one season in. So all I'm saying is, I'm not saying that anyone is necessarily on the hot seat, but I'm just making clear that just because if they do decide to draft a quarterback 6th overall or even move up, that does not necessarily mean that no matter what, everyone is going to be back the following season.
Matt, listen, with all due respect, I mean, I know that the Giants have been horrendous, but we're not at that level yet of ownership of the Panthers. I mean, that is Cartoon Network. All I'm saying is...
All right, well, hold on. I'll give you another example, okay? Because you don't like his Carolina example. He's giving you facts, and you don't digest that. Okay.
No, I do
No, it's okay, Wilson, I'm here to appease to you. Don't worry. Now I'm going to throw out another organization, okay? And you're probably not going to like this either. The Chicago Bears drafted Justin Fields and then fired Matt Nagy. and brought in Matt
It was
Eberflus.
a different resume. It was different. It was a different. That general manager didn't draft him, Lance.
Who didn't draft?
That general manager didn't draft Fields. It was the prior regime.
Yeah, what? No, but the
They
point.
wanted
No,
to
no, but
get rid of. They wanted to get rid of him.
the point is, you just said that when your team drafts a quarterback, you buy more time for the head coach. So I'm giving you another example of a drafted quarterback, and they moved up to draft Justin Fields because they traded with the Giants, and the guy did not retain his job. Matt Nagy was still fired.
Well, but listen, Matt, Lance, you can give me you can give me examples and everything, and there's always going to be, maybe 10, 20%. I'm saying in the generality of the NFL, usually when you draft a quarterback, everybody buys time. The general manager and the head coach usually gets a little more real estate. Can you agree with me on that?
I mean, if you look at the track record and history of the NFL, yeah, I think that there's some validity behind it, but I wouldn't assume that it's a guarantee the way you're painting it. And here's the other thing, okay? The Giants, by the way, Brian Daboll is the first coach to be entering his third season with the team since Tom Coughlin. So you're all of a sudden campaigning for them to continue to go in the direction of what they did with the three previous coaches?
My eyes don't lie to me, Lance. Did you see last year? I know. Listen, you're gonna tell me the same thing, that they lost their quarterback and there was injuries all over the place and there was a hard schedule. I understand all that, but you got to be competent. You got to be. The Giants didn't look like a well-coached team last year. Listen, I give you one example, one game that told me all I needed to know. It was against the Las Vegas Raiders. The first quarter, they looked like they were sleepwalking. They didn't look ready to play. That was on the coach. That was on the whole coaching staff.
Well, I mean, clearly,
I'm not just making stuff up off the air. It's what I see with my own eyes.
Well, and I could give you. I mean, in fairness, though, I could give you, and appreciate the phone call, Wilson. I could give you examples from other teams that even made the playoffs that had rough games. I mean, one game alone on an island doesn't mean that the coaching staff is not connecting with the players. Teams have rough games. I mean, look at the Kansas City Chiefs. They lost to the Raiders, Matt, if you remember, and they wound up winning the Super Bowl. And it was an ugly game on Christmas where Mahomes threw a pair of interceptions. The Raiders didn't even score a point on offense. Both of their touchdowns were on defense, and they beat Kansas City, and nobody was expecting the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. So, I mean, yes, everyone could pick out a bad game. That doesn't mean that there's necessarily a disconnect between the coaching and the players. But if the campaign is to continue to go with the same philosophy of every 2 years you bring in a head coach, I don't see how that's a strong selling point either. And not just for the Giants, I would say for any other NFL franchise right now.
Yeah, no, I'm with you completely. And I mean, the caller just pretty much said, oh, who cares about all the injuries? They don't matter. But the Giants were down to their third string quarterback, an undrafted rookie who started the season on the practice squad. And yet Brian Daboll, Mike Kafka, the whole coaching staff was able to still guide the Giants to a 3-game winning streak, which at least momentarily got them right back in the wild card race towards the end of the season. Like John Mara mentioned this at the annual meeting the other day, that one of the things he liked the most about Brian Daboll and this past season of Brian Daboll was that the team kept fighting. They never gave up. I mean, going into Week 18, a game that meant absolutely nothing for the Giants, they went and beat the Philadelphia Eagles, who were still battling for the NFC East title. And not only did they beat them, they destroyed them. That game was not even remotely close, to the point where they took Jalen Hurts out in the second quarter because the game was already out of hand. So say what you want about some of the things that have gone on the last 2 seasons on the sideline or whatever. The team, the players, they will continue to fight for Brian Daboll until the very last second of every single game. I think we've seen that countless times over the last 2 seasons. So yes, the last season did not go how the Giants would have hoped. I don't think you'll find anyone that would argue against that, but they won 6 games, again, with an undrafted rookie starting, I think, 6 games at quarterback, with countless injuries across the offensive line. They still won 6 games and came 1 play away in, multiple other games where they could have had another win, 2 wins, 3 wins on the season. If the Giants ended up winning 8 games last season, would people still be talking about Brian Daboll the same way that they have been since the end of this season? I do not think so. And if you look at the Jets game and just the Bills game, those two in particular were very, very close to being Giants victories. And I feel like the narrative around this past season would be a whole lot different if those games just went the other way.
And by the way, we actually could have stayed in the Giants' wheelhouse. The Giants drafted Daniel Jones in 2019, and Pat Shurmur was gone in 2020.
There you go.
So here, this own franchise, Matt, drafted a quarterback in the first round, okay, and then made a coaching change. And Wilson calls up and says, "No, it's very rare. Don't worry about it." I mean, how about you stay within the confines of the team you pull for? And that's the perfect example. So, no, I would not assume that just because they draft a quarterback that everybody's security is guaranteed. Not that we're calling for any change, because I just campaigned for you can't keep going every 2 years and changing the head coach. This revolving door does not do wonders for any team. I think if they draft a quarterback, it's because they think that that's the best possible player to help, whether it be the short term or the long term within the franchise. But it's certainly not so that it buys the head coach or the general manager more time. I think any GM knows, Matt, before we wrap up here, that every time you make a pick, you're not guaranteed to see their development for the rest of your tenure. So that's why you've got to maximize sooner rather than later, because to my point earlier, the guy that drafted Justin Fields is no longer with the organization. Ryan Poles is now coming in, and you know what he's doing? He got rid of Fields, and he's drafting his own quarterback. And he's going to hope that Caleb Williams turns out, or else, unfortunately, the revolving door will continue in Chicago.
Yeah, I mean, look, if the Giants end up taking a quarterback, whether it's at 6 or moving up, as you said, it's going to be because they think and are convinced that that is the guy to bring the Giants back to where they were, you know, a little over a decade ago. Playoffs every season, contending for a Super Bowl. They're not going to make a move up or take a quarterback at 6 unless they are convinced that that quarterback that they are taking is going to get them to where they want to go. And I don't buy any other narrative that it's, you know, they make that pick just to buy themselves some time. I think that's kind of ridiculous and short-sighted, honestly.
I would agree with you. Well, that is going to wrap up shop for us here on Wednesday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Today's episode, part of the Giants platforms everywhere, and Giants.com/podcast. Will be up and running again on Thursday, as we'll have more schools to put under the microscope, with the show starting at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. For Matt Citak, I'm Lance Medow, saying so long here on BBKL. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest.
Tired of restless nights? At Leesa, we know good sleep is essential for mental, physical, and emotional health. From memory foam mattresses to hybrids that keep you cool all night long, Leesa's mattresses offer exceptional comfort and support with free delivery and 100 nights to try out your mattress in the comfort of your home. For a limited time, save up to $700 off select mattresses plus 2 free pillows. Go to Leesa.com/iHeart for an additional $50 off mattresses and select goods. Exclusions apply. See Leesa.com for more details.
This is where projects come to life. Our showrooms are designed to inspire with the latest products from top brands, curated in an inviting, hands-on environment, and a team of industry experts to support your project. We'll be there to make sure everything goes as planned, from product selection to delivery coordination. At Ferguson Bath, Kitchen, and Lighting Gallery, your project is our priority.
Find great brands like Bosch at your local showroom or visit us online at ferguson.com/build.